Well, welcome back, guys, to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. Look, it's the last day of August. September, literally right around the corner, starts tomorrow. And it's kind of crazy. We've already just got to August, and now September's on the horizon. Literally, I think tomorrow, it's 1 week till the beginning of the NFL season. We got some good college football games tomorrow. Ari, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Like you said, September is officially football season, even though it's late August for college football. But just in general, September you always think of just football in general. And yeah, 1 week from tomorrow is the Bills Rams opening game, which we'll talk about probably next week, right before that game. And then yeah, we got the first official weekend of college football coming up, starting tomorrow technically, but this weekend as well. So.
Yeah, let's just get straight into it. I mean, we have a lot to cover today. We're going to get first just pretty much right into the big games that are happening tomorrow. Well, the big game. The Backyard Brawl is renewing. We have ranked Pittsburgh, led by former USC quarterback Keaton Slavis, entering the transfer portal and lining up at Pittsburgh. Going again, but it's kind of ironic here, facing off against his old predecessor, JT Daniels. He's been bouncing around college football. First started at USC, and then he got injured, and then who replaced him, and then who ended up in Georgia, being on that championship winning program. But then, he wanted to get a starting role, and he wasn't gonna beat out Stetson Bennett, so he shipped his ass up all the way up to West Virginia, and now we have kind of a great game to kick off the college football season, in my opinion. Right now, the line is obviously on Pittsburgh. They have their money line is on Pittsburgh, and the spread is about 7.5. So over on. So honestly, I kind of like this spread. I think it's gonna be a lot closer than people think. This West Virginia team has a lot of excitement around it, and we've seen what Jay Daniels can do. He can ball. He can throw the ball well, and I feel like that this is going to be the coming out game for him. Now, obviously, Pittsburgh, they're coming off a great successful season with Kenny Pickett, the former sensation from first-round QB, going to the Steelers. They had a great season with him last year, but now they move out. They lose, obviously, Addison in the transfer portal. He went to USC, but here we are. First real game of the season, in my opinion. West Virginia, Pittsburgh tomorrow night. Ari, what do you think? What are your predictions for this one?
Yeah, my lean here is Pittsburgh -7.5. I think just overall well-rounded offensively. I think Pittsburgh has the edge. You mentioned the first game post Kenny Pickett for Pittsburgh, and they shouldn't lose too much at quarterback, getting Keaton Slavis from USC in the transfer portal. You mentioned they lost Jordan Addison, who then went to USC in the transfer portal, so they kind of swapped in that regard. But he won the award last year for the best wide receiver in the nation in college football. But Pittsburgh, they returned their entire starting offensive line. Their leading returning wide receivers, Jared Wayne, a 6'3" senior who caught 47 passes for over 650 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. And the likely replacement for Addison is a transfer from Akron, Konata Mumfield, who was a freshman All-American last year with Akron. He got 8 touchdowns, and they're kind of hoping, from what I'm hearing, is that for him to be the kind of the number one for Pittsburgh. And then their leading rusher from last year, Israel Bonacan, I believe is how you pronounce it, is returning, and they're hoping to see him take a step forward this season as well. West Virginia, they returned all 5 starters on the offensive line, but last year they are dead last in rushing, and they allowed the most sacks in Big 12. So that's my biggest worry with West Virginia is their offensive line. But JT Daniels does have the scramble ability that could help them, but at some point, if your offensive line is bad enough, that doesn't matter. You mentioned Daniels 2 years at USC and 2 years at Georgia, and then you mentioned 2019. Both these guys are at USC, so there's that kind of storyline in this game. Their leading receiver from last year transferred to Florida State until they lost him, Winston Wright, until their second leading receiver from last year will take over. Their leading rusher from last year, Letty Brown, graduated. I think he signed with the Chargers, an undrafted free agent, so they lost him. So between losing your leading rusher and the offensive line still being concerned, that's my biggest worry. And not only that, but on the defensive side, they lost one of their best defensive linemen to Miami, and then their leading tackler, a linebacker, to Colorado. So they lost 2 key defensive players in the transfer portal as well. And so I think Pittsburgh and Keaton Slavis takes command of this game and wins by double digits in this game.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I definitely agree with you. The offensive line for West Virginia is going to be one of their big struggles this year, and it always has been last year, as you said. Allowing the most sacks in the Big 12, dead last in rushing. Very offensively struggling. That offensive line, one of the bigger key points, and that's going to be one of the bigger struggles again this year for this West Virginia program. And you mentioned they already lost their big rusher. They lost their number 1 receiver, so already losing your top 2 options in the receiving or rushing part of the program, and you have to come up with a Pitt team, who is obviously preseason ranked for a reason, obviously still retaining most of that team, except for Jordan Addison, obviously, who went to USC. They bring in this new quarterback, obviously, who has had success at USC, Keaton Slovis, and I agree with you. I think Pittsburgh minus 7.5 is great. I think that spread is going to be a lot more. I think it's going to be about a 10-point game. But I definitely see Pittsburgh winning this. And I like how they're bringing it back, the backyard brawl. I feel like Pittsburgh is definitely going to take this one. They definitely just have more talent in West Virginia, and they're not going to be struggling. But I feel like in the Big 12, especially with, powerhouses at like Oklahoma and Texas and Oklahoma State, who are definitely near the top of the Big 12, I feel like it's going to be a struggle for West Virginia, just playing, great competition outside. So I'm definitely hammering that money line, and I'm definitely doing Pittsburgh minus 7.5. I feel like they'll win comfortably by 10 as well in tomorrow's game. And that game, I believe, is 7 o'clock Pacific. So it's going to be a late game tomorrow. Eastern. Oh, yeah. 7 o'clock Eastern. So 4 p.m. Pacific. I'm excited to see how these new quarterbacks in their new programs will look in the first game. Obviously, a little bit of a rivalry there, since obviously we've talked about how Keaton Slavis and JT Daniels, both former starting quarterbacks for USC, now on separate teams, kind of, reuniting, kind of a small road kind of a thing. So definitely should be a good game to watch tomorrow. We got another one coming up for you tomorrow. Obviously, Thursday is kind of a slower day. Obviously, Saturday is the bigger day for the beginning of return of college football. But another intriguing matchup that we have for this Thursday is Penn State and Purdue. And, this is another Big Ten, I want to say like struggle, but I would say this is a good Big Ten matchup. Like we had Nebraska versus Northwestern. I feel like these two programs, definitely kind of in that same realm of, where they're going to be. Penn State obviously having a lot more of a better track record in terms of, who's there, in terms of James Franklin, all of Happy Valley, different atmosphere in Penn State. And you have this Purdue program who has produced a lot of talent out of the Big Ten, definitely with rookie David Bell. And we've seen so much talent in the receiving core come out of Purdue. Right now, I'm pretty sure Purdue is the favorite, minus 115.
Penn State is minus 3.5. Like these are my like leans is what I'm putting it like in.
I get it. And Penn State obviously the favorite. Definitely good track record. I feel like Penn State, it's definitely going to be one of those contenders in the Big Ten East with Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Those big three are definitely kind of leading the charge. But then you have Penn State right behind them. All right, what do you have like expectation wise for this in this Big Ten matchup between two pretty respectable programs in terms of bringing out a lot of talent from both schools?
Yeah, for sure. Both teams lost their leading receivers from last year. You mentioned David Bell from Purdue, and then Jahan Dotson from Penn State to the Commanders. Both returned their starting quarterbacks from last year, Aiden O'Connell for Purdue and Sean Clifford for Penn State. Purdue's second leading receiver from last year, Milton Wright, is also academically ineligible, and so that's a big loss as well. Not only losing David Bell, but him as well. Another team had a huge run game last year. Penn State's backfield will be one to watch, though. They have a couple of freshman running backs that have been talked up, a couple of highly recruited freshmen. Nick Singleton, I believe, was a 5-star. And then Katron Allen was a 4-star, and they've both been given plenty of hype in training camp for Penn State. So that will be something to watch as, last year they didn't have much of a run game, and neither team had much of a run game last year in terms of consistency wise. Both defenses lost some pieces as well, but my lean here is under 53 because just with the losses of, their best receivers from last year, not much of a run game. Like I said, we'll see if Penn State can pick it up this year with the two freshmen. But, I considered looking at a side, but I thought it was too close. I just liked under 53 a little bit better. I think it might be a little bit of a slow start with new offenses. The same quarterbacks returning, but losing the best receivers from last year, I think will be a big loss. And then for Purdue, the two best from last year, I think will be a big loss. But, I'm sure they'll have guys that will fill in. But as far as I know, they had no notable receivers transfer over to them, or no notable freshmen that I saw. Obviously, these are all the first games for all these teams. So, even a few days from now, maybe we have a different stance on these teams once we actually see them, on the field for a few weeks. But my early lean here is just under 53, just with all the losses that both teams had and a likely lack of a run game on both sides.
Yeah, and you mentioned the lack of the run game. That was one of the bigger things Penn State, really struggled with these past couple of seasons. Really establishing a run game, only generating about 3.5 yards a carry last season. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be good for any offense this year. And you mentioned Purdue's, losing David Bell, and just the lack of, retained talent coming from both schools. I definitely agree with you. I'll take the under as well. And then here we have Sean Clifford, finally trying to chase a Big Ten title. He has been just right there. He's always been a respectable quarterback in the Big Ten for Penn State, but he hasn't taken it to the next level. And I feel like I don't feel like it's really going to take a huge leap as well, just because of how that offense is definitely going to be lacking with obviously no Jahan Dotson, their leading receiver from last year, and one of their biggest struggles, obviously, the run game. And I feel like that's going to continue into this season. One of the bigger matchups, I think, is just the offensive line of Penn State versus the defensive line of Purdue. I feel like Purdue definitely is going to miss, Karlaftis, I think is his last name.
Yeah.
The first round rookie going to the Chiefs. They're definitely going to miss him, obviously, on that defensive line. But, they definitely have one of the more deeper rotations, I think, within the Big Ten. And I thought that could be proven prevalent against that Penn State offensive line, which has struggled many, many times. I still feel like this Penn State team, has pretty much owned this series. I think last I checked, it was 15 to 3 in terms of the series, and Penn State is leading. So I definitely agree with you. I take Penn State money line, but I definitely think this game is going to go under. It's first game of the regular season for both teams. Still working out the kinks. Obviously this is the first game of the season, so there's not really any expectations that you should have. I definitely agree with you on that under as well. And we'll be recapping all that action for you Friday as we get headed to some more prime matchups like Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Utah, Florida. Definitely a big weekend for some interconference games, and we'll preview all of those on Friday. But now we're going to transition into we're going to transition into the NFL and some late breaking news. Trey Sermon, he was drafted obviously out of I think it was out of Ohio State, I believe. Yeah, after he transferred from Oklahoma, he drafted by the 49ers and now surprisingly have waived him. He has been waived by the 49ers already. Look, I feel like Trey Sermon has kind of got the rough end of the stick here. He never really got a chance in that Niners backfield with guys like Elijah Mitchell and Raheem Mostert. That running back room was so deep. And you know how Kyle Shanahan likes to pick his favorites. Obviously, the whole Brandon Ayuk situation last year, and now Trey Sermon has just kind of got the rough end of the stick. In my opinion, I don't know what you feel about this. I kind of feel, from an NFL standpoint, I feel kind of sad for the guy. He had an amazing season with Ohio State before he got drafted this past season, and then everyone thought, he was going to have a bigger role with the Niners, and we never really saw any of that. So, also from a fantasy perspective, kind of just disappointing to see such a young guy leaving, being waived from that backfield. Ari, what are your thoughts?
No, yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think he got a fair shot, but that's what Kyle Shanahan does, is he has people put in his doghouse. Obviously we don't know if behind the scenes if something happened between them or whatnot. But you mentioned Ayuk as well before he finished strong last year, was also in the same situation. And, I'm sure Sermon will get picked up by another team. Like some team will take a chance on him, and hopefully that team will give him a better shot. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to have a huge role either way in this backfield. There were some, training camp reports of him looking good, but I feel like, everybody looks good in training camp for the most part, according to reports. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But, yeah, I mean, I think it was to make room for an offensive lineman, I believe is what I saw. They took him in the 3rd round just a couple of years ago. And so now they retained the 3rd round pick, Tyrion Davis-Price, from this past year, the draft. And then undrafted free agent Jordan Mason also remained in the backfield over him, which is interesting. But I'm sure some team will claim Sermon off waivers. And hopefully that team, I'm sure that team will give him more of a shot than Shanahan did.
Yeah, I hope he finds a new home somewhere. Definitely got the rough end of the stick, and definitely you mentioned just kind of how Kyle Shanahan likes to run his team. Definitely not really giving a fair opportunity to most guys, but obviously that's just us being on the outside. We don't have any insider reports from the Niners camp or organization, but just a sad ending for a story that never really got to begin. I definitely hope he finds a new home somewhere. I hope he finds a better home, better situation for him, because he's definitely a young running back in this league where, prominent running backs nowadays are getting injured, like a Saquon or someone like that. And then obviously you're going to need a replacement, or, how these backfields are now turning into more of a committees, like Denver situation or what was Houston's situation. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but definitely feel like he definitely has a chance to, work somewhere where he's going to be respected. So I hope he finds a new home somewhere. But we're going to transition right into our next one here. Speaking of, so Marlon Mack, this was an interesting one. So he got released this morning, got waived from the Houston Texans. A big surprise after a lot of people. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was yesterday. A big surprise after a lot of people were saying that Lovie Smith said that Dameon Pierce was not going to be the running back one, but then kind of was put in the running back one. So that's great to see Dameon Pierce, the rookie out of Florida, get that starting role for the Houston Texans. Marlon Mack, he's waived, but then he's back with the Texans practice squad, signing with him. So it kind of looks like we know who won the battle there between Dameon Pierce and Marlon Mack. From a fantasy perspective, I like what Dameon Pierce is doing. Obviously, one of the higher rushing grades. It's only the preseason, but still, it looks like that offensive line may actually be confident enough for Dameon Pierce to have a pretty good rushing season on the ground. Ari, what do you make of this just from a fantasy perspective? Do you like Dameon Pierce a lot better now, considering that Marlon Mack is all the way degraded to the practice squad? What do you think of this situation down in Houston?
Yeah, I mean, I never expected Mack to – I always thought Pierce was going to be the lead back eventually. This doesn't change my stance too much. But, I've seen some people who are calling him like an RB1, which I'm not willing to go that far. Just in that situation, the lack of draft capital, I'm not sure. In the passing game, I feel like Rex Burkhead might maintain a role in the passing game out of that backfield. So I think Pierce he'll be the lead back, and he'll see pretty good volume to be, an RB2 kind of in that range. I'm not willing to call him an RB1. I've seen people draft him the 3rd or 4th round, which I'm not willing to go that far yet. But the 5th, 6th round, for those who are still have drafts moving forward, sounds about right to me. I know we have a draft tonight coming up, but yeah, I think he'll be in the RB2 territory. Just given, the offense isn't awful. Mills showed some promise last year, and I think he'll take some steps forward this year, but just overall with the situation as a whole, I think Pierce should shape up as to be a pretty safe RB2 kind of in that range.
I definitely agree with you there. I feel like Dameon Pierce is definitely in more of an RB2 deficit kind of situation, just because we haven't really seen much of him. And I agree with you. I think people drafting him before the 5th round, I feel like you can definitely get some better value for him, just because of the current situation in Houston. And Davis Mills, yes, he's gonna have a full 17 this year, but at the same time, they definitely still have Brandon Cooks, who is kind of the old reliable option on that offense. And he's definitely been proven to be a contributor with multiple 1,000-yard seasons for the Houston Texans. But I like Dameon Pierce as well. I just don't like him enough to be considered an RB1. I definitely would still consider him as an RB2. But in terms of the Marlon Mack situation, I feel like that kind of clears up room for, like you said, a Rex Burkhead to kind of be more involved in the passing game, because I feel like that's what their plan is. Rex Burkhead has always been kind of involved more in the passing game as a passing back, and now it kind of just clears up the room for Dameon Pierce to be a kind of a workhorse back for this offensive line. But, I feel like with Houston's situation, they're definitely going to be down a lot more in games. And so, they're going to be relying on the pass a lot more. So that's why, definitely Dameon Pierce is more of a late flyer. I'd say 5th to 6th round. I wouldn't take him over guys who have better value or in better situations. So I definitely agree with you there. But I'd like to see how Dameon Pierce comes out heading into the season. Definitely going to be one of the more intriguing backs late round, just because he's definitely going to be more of a workhorse back now that Marlon Mack has been signed to the practice squad. So we'll definitely see how Houston comes out week 1 using Dameon Pierce. But now we're going to transition to, MLB. And we're going to do, obviously, we haven't done a lot of MLB in the recent memories, but we're going to pull up the current playoff races because September, obviously, tomorrow, we're getting near the end of the season. Most teams have about 40-ish games left in the regular season. And we look at the American League right now, and I mean, look, you have the New York Yankees, who have been one of the more abysmal, horrible teams since the All-Star break, just got out of their funk that they head into the All-Star break with, have still not reached 80 wins yet on the season, and they were near 70 back in July. So it's just kind of crazy to see the fall off of this Yankees team, but, still keeping command of the division over the Rays and Blue Jays. And obviously the Cinderella story, the Baltimore Orioles, you just love to see something like that. Definitely competing for that wild card, because that division, I feel like, is just going to be so top heavy with the Rays and Yankees and Blue Jays. And then you have Boston, very, very shocking, just a very unusual season for this Boston Red Sox team. I feel like they've kind of just given up at this point. Definitely kind of a big struggle in the American League. He's competing with all these teams like the Orioles. Now we have to put respect on the Orioles name now, because obviously, they're bringing up the talent there, having fun. I like to compare this Orioles team to the Mariners team of last year. No one really had any idea about this Orioles team even being contenders, let alone not only in the division, just in the wild card race. And excuse me, sorry, I had to take out the gum, but it's still crazy that this Orioles team definitely has a lot of momentum on their side right now. They definitely, even with offloading guys like Trey Mancini and Jorge Lopez during the trade deadline, they still are in this division, in that all-star race. So definitely great to see. Ari, let's start with the American League East. We definitely see 3 teams that are definitely going to be making a playoff appearance, in my opinion, with the Yankees, Rays, and Blue Jays. I feel like those 3 have playoff potential. And then you have Baltimore right behind them. In that division, do you see 3 teams making it to the playoffs, or 2, or if not even 4? What do you think of Baltimore's situation?
Yeah, I'm not going to say 4, but I think 3 sounds pretty realistic. Looking at the wild card right now, you got the Rays in first, Blue Jays in third, and then you got a 3-game gap between the Blue Jays and then the Twins and the Orioles for the 3rd spot. So I think what we're seeing now with the Rays, Mariners, and Blue Jays is pretty likely going to be the 3 wild card, I think, in the AL. But I mean, the Yankees were once up, 15 plus games in the division. Now it's down to 7. I'm not sure how many more games had the Yankees and Rays have, but I mean, we got a little bit over 30 games left. Like, I don't think the Yankees are necessarily a lock to even win the division. I think they're, they still have a pretty decent lead at 7 games, but that's nothing compared to what it was, you mentioned, back in July, like a month ago. So I think that might be something to keep an eye on, especially if the 2 teams, Yankees, Rays, or even Yankees, Blues, have a number of games left to face each other towards, the last month of the season. And the Orioles, Dylan Bautista has filled in perfectly in the closer role behind with Jorge Lopez traded. They still have a really solid bullpen. They just had a lot of young, fun players. They just called up, I think, Gunnar Henderson, I think is his name, and another top young prospect to go along with Adley Rutschman and the rest of the young core they have. So, I mean, I think even if they just missed the playoffs this year, they're definitely going to be a team, to keep an eye on continuing into next season as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on all those points. I feel like the Baltimore Orioles, like I said, I feel they're the Seattle Mariners of last year. A young, fun team that no one really had around, but they're hanging around. They're getting that momentum. They're starting to believe, and I feel like they're just going to come up a little bit short. But definitely signs of a program that's here and really ready to come back into the playoff light. You have the Yankees and Rays, and speaking of that, they play a series this weekend, so that season series is definitely not over. They play, I believe, it's a 3-game series against those two teams in Tampa this weekend, and then the following weekend it's in New York to wrap up the season. So those are 6 pivotal games for both teams that could really make a difference in this division race. And then you have the Blue Jays right behind them. And the one thing pretty much plaguing the Blue Jays is their pitching ability. That was one thing they tried to acquire at the deadline. Their starting rotation's not really lived up to what it could have been this year with guys like Kikuchi, as we tried to warn them, but we tried. Us Mariner fans obviously tried to warn Toronto about how lackluster he really is, and he's proved his point. So I feel like Toronto definitely just hanging around there could be one of those teams that slip out just because of pitching, but I feel like definitely because of how stacked offensively they are, I feel like they definitely will be around there, and I feel like the bottom 2 teams are just going to be missing the playoffs. So I move to the Central now, and obviously this is a tight race at the top between the Cleveland Guardians and the Minnesota Twins, and then you have the Chicago White Sox, who should be up there, but here we go again. The Chicago White Sox just can't win baseball games. Here they are now. They're sitting under 500, and this team was a World Series contender, and now they're sitting under 500. Just many injuries, just horrible to see for this White Sox team. So I feel like it's getting close to. I feel like their time is ticking, and obviously their head coach, their manager Tony La Russa, he has been on the hot seat all season. I've seen all the things about how Chicago White Sox fans want him gone immediately, and the most interesting stat ever I saw this. So, are you ready for this? They are 918, and 9,018 in games since like 1906. They are the most average team I've ever seen. That's crazy to me. But Chicago, I feel like we're almost let's rule them out. Obviously, Detroit and Kansas City definitely ruling them out. They need some more future for them. But at the top, let's take a look at the top here, Ari. And you have this division race between the Guardians and the Twins. And it just keeps getting interesting because obviously both teams are also in the wild card race. So I feel like if one of them switches up in terms of positioning, as you can see, the Minnesota Twins right there behind the Blue Jays for the 3rd spot in the wild card. Ari, who do you have winning this division if you can pick one at the end of August? Obviously, the Guardians, they definitely have some good pitching in terms of the rotation and the bullpen with Clase, definitely one of the more stronger relievers in the league. And then you have McKenzie, who's an emerging star. And then you have the Twins, who definitely made the right moves to really make themselves a contender in this division and a wild card appearance. But injuries are plaguing them again. Obviously, Byron Buxton injured once again. That's the one thing plaguing him from being a real star in this MLB. So right now we're heading into September, and this race is so tight you can't even hold on to it. Who do you have winning? And where do you see these two teams finishing in terms of just wild card or in the division?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it; it's 1.5 difference between them in the division, but the Twins are 3 back, so this could be like the division winner makes the playoffs, obviously, but then whoever doesn't win the division might not make it in the wild card. So that makes it even more important. As a Mariners fan, we got a good look at the Guardians this past weekend, and they're a really, really solid pitching team. They don't have their power, but just solid contact. Stephen Kwan looks really good. Obviously, you have Jose Ramirez, who's an AL MVP candidate, and then just really solid starting pitching, and then really solid bullpen overall. So there's kind of just really well balanced overall. And then you have the Twins, who seem to be leading the division for most of the year. up until fairly recently, but now they just swept the Giants. I believe the other earlier this week or late last week. The last series they swept the Giants. They've won 5 in a row now, so they're starting to heat up. They have a pretty solid pitching as well, and then they traded for the aforementioned Jorge Lopez, we mentioned, from the Orioles as a new closer. I think the Twins, I don't know, I think it's going to be super, super close, and it's going to come down to maybe even the last weekend or at least the last week or two of the season. I'm kind of leaning towards the Guardians right now to win the division. I think they're a little bit more consistent of a team right now. But I'm not sure if they have any series coming up. I don't know if you want to look it up, career or not, but that could be the big difference as well as a potential tiebreaker as well between the two teams in the season series. But I don't know, I think the Guardians just have a bit safer, more consistent pitching and just overall hitting. That they're not a big home run hitting team, but sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes that's good for teams to not rely on the home run ball and just be a consistent hitting team with, you have Kwan and Ramirez, and you guys have guys like Naylor, Jimenez. So you have a pretty consistent stable of hitters in that, early to middle part of the lineup.
Yeah. To answer your question, they play, I want to say, they play 8 times. There's a 5-game series between the two teams later in September in Cleveland, and then a 3-game series in Minnesota. So definitely a lot of time left for these two teams heading into September. I definitely agree with you. I feel like the Guardians have the better edge just because of how, that lineup is, it's not a home run heavy lineup, but, they play small ball. They get the singles and the doubles, and that's why Jose Ramirez is definitely on that all-star consideration because, he brings in RBIs, and Stephen Kwan, he's one of the more reliable hitters. When you need a hit, Stephen Kwan will be one of those guys. So in terms of momentum, I definitely see the Guardians, leaning into this division. I feel like they could, potentially win this out, but who says, anything can happen in that 8-game stretch for these two teams facing off later in the regular season. We'll see how that Central stripes up. And then finally, in the American League, we'll have the AL West. And once again, this is a pretty top dominant division between the Houston Astros and our Seattle Mariners, two teams that are looking to make playoff appearances. And then you have the Texas Rangers who, sit way behind, but they have a respectable team, and then followed by the two poverty franchises in that the Oakland A's and the Los Angeles Angels. I had to call them out because they're poverty. Let's be real here. They can't talk. So here we are. So the Angels, obviously a mess. The Mariners, they're right there. Obviously, us Mariner fans have been waiting and clamming for a playoff appearance, and I feel like I'm not going to say anything, but September's here, and, they're still in that playoff race, and then Houston obviously leading this division and kind of running away with it at the same time, 12 games up ahead of this Mariners team. So here we are, Ari. The Mariners team that we've talked so highly about, September on the horizon, 13 games over 500. This Houston team, one of the best teams in baseball. The division looks like a wrap, but let's talk about this wild card. Where do you think the Mariners are going to end up in this wild card race? I feel like they could end up either being any one of those 3 positions with how they're playing baseball. But, we definitely have an easier stretch of the season after this weekend, after playing Cleveland on the road for 3 this coming weekend, and then a struggling White Sox team at home, a red-hot Atlanta team at home, and then San Diego, who also is struggling. We'll get into them a little later. Where do you see this Mariners team finishing in this wild card, hopefully, when we hit October?
Yeah, you look at the top 3, and they're all within 1 game of each other. So obviously you could argue, first, second, or third wild card. But you mentioned the favorable schedule for the Mariners compared to the Rays and Blue Jays, who have, a number of games against their tough AL East division, which is why I think the Mariners will end up in the first wild card. For that reason, the much more favorable schedule, and they've just seemed to be a little bit more consistent as of late, than the Rays and the Blue Jays as well. One of the best bullpens in the league. Our starting rotation has been really, really dominant the past week or two. And then, the offense is definitely the biggest question mark or concern, inconsistency for the Mariners. But, you just have to get hot at the right time. They have they have the bats to do it with Mitch Haniger, who's been arguably he's been the best hitter since coming back from injury at the beginning of August. We had the recent extension for Julio Rodriguez. Ty France has been hitting a lot better the past couple of games. They really need him to pick it up as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a combination of the pitching, both starting and bullpen, and then the Farrell schedule, I think, is why I have the Mariners finishing the season as the number 1 wild card and hosting whoever's the number 2 wild card, which is probably going to be the Rays or Blue Jays.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like this Mariners team definitely has a lot of more of an easier path into this playoff race with the 2 other teams, the Blue Jays and the Rays, definitely having to beat not only each other up, but other teams in the American League East as we head into the end of the regular season. The Mariners, obviously, after that stretch that we've said with Cleveland and Chicago and Atlanta and San Diego, they only play teams that are under 500, and that's easy wins for the Mariners right there. And then you have a team like, for example, we'll go with the Blue Jays. And the Blue Jays, obviously, they got to play Baltimore and Tampa Bay and New York. They got to play Tampa Bay, I believe. That's another 9 games against Tampa Bay, who is right up there. So definitely beating each other up in September. They got to play the Yankees still. Obviously, they got to play Baltimore still. So I feel like heading into the end of the season, I feel like Toronto and Tampa Bay, those are 2 teams that definitely have a lot of more harder times with their schedule. But the Mariners, obviously, one of the more favored ones. I definitely agree with you. I can see them finishing in the best wild card finish at the 4 spot, just because of how the schedules are shaped up. But obviously, that depends on how the Mariners play, and we see how dominant guys like George Kirby and Robbie Ray have been in August. Just absolute dominance from both pitchers. And Luis Castillo, he is on another level. I feel like Gilbert, now he's facing easier opponents. He'll get a lot better. And then the last missing piece of the puzzle, Marco Gonzalez.
But in the playoffs, you only really need to start 4 guys. So you have that, stable of 4 starters, which is arguably the best top 4, I feel like, in the AL, I feel like, between Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, who am I missing? Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, Robbie Ray. Yeah, you mentioned Robbie Ray and Kirby were both dominant. I think Robbie Ray's ERA in August and 5 starts was like under 1.5. So, I mean, if he can regain even close to his Cy Young form from last year, then Castillo is, at the top of his game this year. And then you got Kirby, who's probably the best AL rookie pitcher arguably this year. Yes, arguably the best top 4 in the rotation in the AL.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a fun race as we head into the end of the race for the wild card in the American League as it gets, tighter and tighter. But now we're going to move on to the National League. We'll start with the NL East, and right now it's a race between the top 2 teams in the NL East, between the Braves and the Mets. Obviously, both great programs. The Braves, obviously defending World Series champions. They're definitely trying to make another appearance. They're they're almost 30 games over 500. They're pretty much a lock for that wild card, or potentially the division as they compete with the Mets. And I feel like this is one of the more intriguing rivalries in baseball right now between the Braves and the Mets, just because, how badly each team wants to win the division. And it's kind of funny, obviously, with how, the Mets, with Edwin Diaz, the Tommy Trumpet, that whole thing. Definitely one of the bigger storylines this season. And then you have the Philadelphia Phillies, 10 games behind. They're kind of the afterthought in that division, but they're still competing for a playoff spot. They're getting healthier. Bryce Harper is now coming back into this lineup, so they have the biggest bat that they've been waiting, now finally returning. And then obviously Miami and Washington, they're afterthoughts. So we see the 3 teams, right? And you obviously Philly, they're right there. They're pretty much the team right behind Atlanta in the wild card. So that'll be an interesting 4 or 5 series if it happens between Atlanta and Philly fighting for that playoff spot. But okay, Ari, the Mets. Obviously, we've talked about how good this rotation has been. It has been dominant. Here they are. They sit at 80 wins. Do you think the Mets are going to hold on for this division, or do you think the Braves are going to give them a huge run for their money?
I mean, I don't think they're going to run away with it. I think the Braves will definitely give them a run for their money. But I mean, we've talked about the DeGrom Scherzer 1-2 punch is easily, not even arguably, it's easily the best 1-2 punch in the whole MLB. And then you mentioned Edwin Diaz at the top of their bullpen. Their lineup's been really good. I mean, the Braves as well. Their starting pitching's been a little bit more inconsistent, I feel like, but their offense has been really good. Their bullpen has been, I feel like it's been pretty good, but I don't know. Kenley Jensen, he blew the save a couple of games ago, I want to say it was, on the base loaded walk. He's been a little bit inconsistent, so I think the Mets have the edge in starting pitching and the bullpen. And the offenses are relatively comparable in terms of, stars and guys who are playing their roles. And so I think the Mets are going to hold on, is what I believe will happen. But I assume that they're not done playing each other, or in September coming up. So that could make or break, whoever wins the division. But I mean, it's a big difference between winning the division and the wild card, because also you get the bye versus not having a bye. But whoever does win the division is pretty much close to a lock to be the first wild card. So obviously both are clear-cut playoff teams, but you have the bye for whoever wins this division as the top two, along with the Dodgers get the bye, in each league this year. But I don't know. I think the pitching will be the difference at the end of the day between who wins the division between the Mets and the Braves.
Yeah, and ironically, they only have one more series coming up, and that's a home series for the Braves at the end of September, heading into the beginning of October. So that's literally one of the final series between those two teams. So it kind of just, you gotta hope for the Braves. Just gotta hope the Mets, slip up here and there. But you mentioned Kenley Jansen's inability to close, and that could really cost this Braves team a chance at that bye. Definitely a big important role having home field advantage and that bye. Probably the number 2 seed in the National League behind the Dodgers. We'll get into them soon, but I feel like those two teams are definitely going to be contending for that division title. And if one wins obviously, whoever wins the division title, I feel like the other team is going to be that fourth wild card. Definitely one of the best teams in that wild card round. To probably play either the Phillies or whoever makes it as the other team heading into that wild card. But then we're going to move on to the Central, and obviously definitely a little more of a top-heavy division as well, with the Cardinals who kind of leading command, and then the Brewers not so far behind. I feel like those are the only two teams you really can talk about in terms of playoff aspirations in this division. As every other team is 15-plus games behind them. We're not even going to talk about that. But here we are, St. Louis. They have Paul Goldschmidt, Triple Crown, seeker right there. Nolan Arenado. They have a 1-2 combo in the bullpen with Jordan Hicks and Ryan Hesley, one of the hardest throwing right-handers in the game right now. They still have a pretty decent rotation. Obviously, a few holes here and there, but how this offense is just producing so much this year. Paul Goldschmidt having a career year. He's probably going to win NL MVP. One of the favorites as well to win NL MVP. But you have this Milwaukee Brewers lineup, and here we go again. The Milwaukee Brewers, they are a team that has one of the best rotations. Definitely a great rotation with Corbin Burns and Peralta and who, and a bunch of names in the rotation, but they have no hitting. And here we go again. The offense has seemed to just pretty much vanish or disappeared, or comes in spurts because of a guy named Mark on their big screen talking about, oh, we did it for Mark. Okay, why can't you do that every other 161 game in the season? That's another game. That's another story. That's another story for another time. But I feel like this is St. Louis's division to lose right now. I just feel like St. Louis is on a different level right now offensively than this Milwaukee team. Obviously, there's still plenty of ball game left in the season, but I feel like St. Louis has a bunch of momentum on their side, and I feel like they could definitely make some noise in this division, and not only in the division, just in this wherever they fall into the probably going to be the third division winner. So whoever they face, some probably someone out of the NL East. Definitely going to be interesting to see how they fall. Ari, look, I gotta say, I feel like this is the Cardinals' division to lose. Are you riding with me, or where do you see that?
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely. I mean, the he should get in the trade deadline with Jordan Montgomery from the Yankees, who's been really, really solid for them in the rotation. The Brewers, like you mentioned, the hitting's been inconsistent, and I mean, even the starting pitching hasn't been, I think, what most thought it would be heading into the season. And their bullpen, I guess, it's a good thing that they trade Josh Hader, which we'll get into with the Padres. But I mean, yeah, I feel like the pitching hasn't been quite lived up to expectations, and their hitting's still been inconsistent. So right now they're 2 back of the Padres for that third wild card. So they're still, right in that race, 2.5 back of the Phillies for the second wild card. So there's still plenty of games left for them to get into that wild card race. But yeah, division wise, I agree. It's definitely the Cardinals' division to lose. I think that they should definitely hold on to the division lead through the end of the season.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The moves that St. Louis has done to really solidify themselves as a playoff contender, they're definitely going to be right there with it. And right behind them, you go along with how good Jordan Montgomery has been doing and how Nolan Arenado is having a solid season. That offense doing great things, great future. Just great atmosphere in St. Louis. Definitely, and then obviously the bigger story, Albert Pujols, his chase to 700. It's just a great story, and obviously it's kind of the last ride for Pujols, Molina, and Wainwright. Most of those guys from that 2000 team that has already won, has a ring under their belt, but just going one last ride. And I feel like this team is set up pretty well for a division crown once again, and sitting themselves in that third playoff spot, probably facing against the Mets or the Braves, whoever come out of that division. And finally, we're going to get into the last division, the NL West. And is there? Oh, you know what? Let's not get into the NL West because we don't know if the Dodgers have won the NL West. They are already at 90. That team's a cheat code. So let's get into the NL wild card now. So the San Diego Padres were having a great lead over the Phillies, and now they choked that away because Josh Hader, definitely one of the worst pitchers in baseball right now, literally having a 12 ERA. He lost all command, lost all control. He doesn't know how to pitch right now. And so now the Padres are only a couple games, I believe, over the Milwaukee Brewers for that third wild card spot. And obviously, they're not going to contend for a division crown. That's way too out of that. That's way too out of their mindset right now. But they're right now in a playoff spot. But that playoff gap is thinning closer and closer. And look, the Padres, they were one of these teams that a lot of people had right after that trade deadline. Obviously, acquiring Juan Soto and Brandon Drury and Josh Hader, all the names that they acquired at the trade deadline have just seemed to disappear and have not done any production for this team. And it kind of makes you question on whether or not this Padres team is really going to make a contention in this playoff run. Obviously, they got to play the Dodgers. I'm looking at their schedule right now. They got to play the Dodgers twice again. Ooh. They got to play Seattle on the road. Ooh. They got to play the Dodgers again a third time at the end of the month. Ooh. They got to play St. Louis. Ooh. I mean, it's not an easy schedule. I mean, like the first weekend they played Dodgers for 3, and then the next weekend Dodgers for 3, and then Seattle for 2, St. Louis for 3, Dodgers again for 3. Like it just doesn't add up like a season for success for this Padres team. If they really want to get their season, if they want to save their season, they got to keep racking up these wins immediately so they can set them up for the future. But I mean, right now they're beating the Giants. I believe it's like 5-4 in the top of the ninth. So, definitely a must win for them today. But wow, what a disappointment. Do you think the Padres are going to fall out of this playoff race? Ari, what do you think here?
I mean, fortunately for them, the wild card in the NL is a lot. There's not as many teams that are still in the race. In the NL, you just have the inconsistent Brewers to compete with a 2-game lead. Do you know if the Padres play the Brewers anymore this year?
I don't know. They don't. The Padres only play divisional, and then the Mariners, and I believe they play St. Louis and then the Chicago White Sox, but that's it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have 2 inconsistent teams fighting for that last spot. And I mean, even, the Phillies are only a half game up as well. So they're still, right in that mix as well with the Padres and Brewers. And it's anybody's game, anybody's race between two of those three to secure the second and third wild card spots. Hader seems to lost all of his confidence, completely. His past few outings, removing him from the closer role as well. Then we mentioned the Brewers with their inconsistency at the plate and their pitching not quite being, what it was last year, to my understanding. And so, I think the Phillies get the second wild card, I think. And then if I had to say, I still think the Padres have too much offensive firepower to fall out. But then you mentioned a tough schedule as well, coming up in September. I'm still going to say the Padres, eke out that they're wild card, but it's definitely not going to be easy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like the Padres have an uphill battle to climb, but luckily due to that just lack of competitive atmosphere in the NL wild card, except for that top three, except for pretty much the three teams that we've been talking about, the Phillies, Padres, and Brewers. I feel like there's really not much competition for them, so it's kind of just a three-way battle for two spots, and the Padres definitely they have an uphill battle to climb, but you've mentioned the Phillies are only a game ahead, and they definitely got to play the Mets and Braves still to in the rest of the season. And then the Brewers, they just have inconsistencies both at the plate and on the mound right now, so you never really know with them. So the Padres, I feel like, definitely are sitting a little more comfortable, but at the same time, it's not in the up. It's going to be an uphill battle because they got to play the Dodgers 3 times for 3 games. They got to play St. Louis for 3. They got to play Seattle for 2. There's a lot of these games where they need to win that they just keep losing. So definitely going to be interesting to see how the NL wildcard comes down later in the season with just how competitive those 3 positions are pretty much because, you mentioned it. Padres only half game behind of the Phillies, and, the Padres, I think, are on the verge of winning today if they can hold out the win. So that'll move them, as you can see right there. Yeah, they're up 5-4. So they just need 3 more outs and they win this ball game, and then bam, they're tied with the Phillies again. So, winning these decisive games pretty much not only in the division but outside are definitely going to be key for this Padres team if they want to make a playoff appearance and potentially do some damage in the playoffs. So, but we'll be keeping you up with all these races as we head in towards September because, September is a great month for baseball, the last month of the season. Last true month. Obviously, some games are in October due to the delayed start, but definitely one of the better times to be a baseball fan if your team is in contention, like ours is right now. But not going to jinx anything. But this has been an episode of AKP Sports Talk. Tune into Friday. It's going to be mostly college football based because Saturday is a great day with a return of true college football. We got college game day going to Columbus. We got all these star-studded matchups. We're going to be going a complete breakdown of what we think is going to happen this weekend on Friday. So tune into that. But Ari, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, that was all.
All right, we'll see you guys on Friday. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Obviously we're not college students anymore, but we're trying to build our brand and build who we are as sports journalists in the sports journalism realm. So we appreciate all the support you guys give us, and thank you guys for just listening to us. But pass it on to your friends. Make sure you share us. But this has been an episode of AKP Sports Talk. We will see you guys on Friday.